Whether you're shooting the a7C II or the a7CR and you're interested in taking it in the water, let me show you how to put together the DLM Deluxe system for either of these two cameras. Okay, first things first, I'm going to turn my attention to the lens itself. You'll notice that if you look at this lens, you'll see white lettering on the face. Now, when you put this behind a dome port underwater, light's going to come through that dome port, it's going to hit these letters, and it's going to reflect back up into the dome port and then back into the lens. So you're going to see the reflection of this. Now we're going to mitigate that reflection by adding an anti-reflection ring to the front face of our lens. So I'm going to take the anti-reflection ring, and since I only have to do this one time, I'm going to take my time and make sure that it is well aligned. And once I get that far end adhered to the face, I just carefully work it around the circumference and making sure I'm going to cover all of those white letters. And that's as simple as that. Take your lens cap, put it back, set your lens aside. Now we'll turn our attention to the housing itself. Now the housing in the Deluxe system comes with a dual train handle, the trigger extensions that make both reaching the back button and the shutter very comfortable from that right handle, as well as the vacuum valve on the left side here. So let's set it down face, and we're going to release the locking mechanism on the lid hook. And we'll do that to the other side as well. Lift up, and then you can lift the locking mechanism up, and then up and over the hooks at the back. And now the back will simply just pull off straight. We'll take the back and set it to the side. Turn our attention to the inside of the housing. What I like to do here is I like to make sure that my controls are going to be up and out of the way so that when I install my camera, they're not going to interfere. And you'll notice that here in the middle, we have the camera mount. That features a 1/4-20 screw that's going to correspond to the bottom of our camera. And this particular mount is going to work with both the a7C II or the a7CR, so you won't have to worry about which one you choose for that. We're going to set the housing to the side, grab our camera, take that screw, we're going to line it up on the back here. And take a flat-headed screwdriver. You're going to make sure that that gets threaded down, and you're going to want to make sure this is snug down to the camera body. The anti-rotation wall will butt up against the LCD screen on the back, because keeping in mind that nice and snug here, no need to over tighten, but you don't want any movement between these two pieces. Movement between these two pieces will translate to misalignment in the controls. So now we have our camera body, and if we go to the inside of our housing, you'll notice that just like it came out, it will slide back in. But before we do that, we're going to take the hot shoe and we're going to slide it into the camera, make sure it's fully forward. And now we just align the camera mount with the base and slide the assembly into place. Take the opportunity to make sure all of your controls are aligned and are going to operate when everything's sealed up. Okay? Now what we do is check our sealing surface here. You want to make sure that's clean and free of debris. No lubricant is required for this particular seal. We just want to make sure that there is nothing that's going to compromise it. The corresponding O-ring is here. This is a compression seal, so the two faces will squeeze this. Because you don't have any friction to overcome, we don't need lubricant. While lubricant won't hurt this particular O-ring, it will have a tendency to attract extra debris. So since we don't need it, I'm not going to put any lubricant on this O-ring, but I am going to make sure that it's clean. That looks good. Our corresponding sealing surface looks good. I'm going to align the back to the front, set it in place. I'm going to lift the lid hooks, the lid snaps onto the hooks of each side. And then simultaneously, I'm going to push down both the left and the right. And you'll notice that because the back is completely clear, not only can we see our camera, but we will be able to see that O-ring compress as we tighten those two lid hooks now. So you'll hear it snap into place on both sides. And as a confirmation, I like to pull up individually to make sure that they aren't going to open on their own and that the locking mechanism is engaged. Now, I'm just going to simply take the housing and set it down on its bottom. The next thing we need to do is we're going to attach our lens and our port system. Now, in this particular case, you have a lot of lenses to choose from, which you'll need different ports depending on their different lengths and different driving mechanisms to zoom them. So take an opportunity, check out the port chart for this system, and make sure that you choose the right components for your lens. In today's demonstration, I'm going to be using the 16-35 PZ. Now, it's an affordable mid-range zoom lens that I like a lot. It's lightweight, and I also like I said, that it is a PZ version of this lens, meaning it is a power zoom version of the lens. What that means is that I can zoom the lens through buttons on the back of the camera as opposed to a drive mechanism around the circumference of the lens. Take a look at the video in the description below and we can show you how to set that up on your camera. I already have mine set up that way, so we'll just jump straight into putting it onto the camera and then accommodating it with the port system. So you're familiar with your lens and your camera body. So simply remove the body cap and the rear lens cap, and we're going to align the white dot with the white dot on the camera body. Take an opportunity to make sure you remove the lens cap. That will help improve your photos drastically. Bayonet it on like you normally would. Make sure you don't lose your caps. Now let's turn our attention to the port system itself. In this particular scenario, I'm going to want the sharpest image I possibly can get, and in order to do that will be the larger 8-inch dome port. I don't need a driving mechanism, again, because I'm utilizing the PZ version of this lens, but I will need an extension to accommodate the length, so the extension plus the dome port onto the housing will accommodate this lens. So what I like to do is I like to put the extension onto the dome port, and then I like to put that assembly onto the housing. Take your dome port, and you'll notice that on both the dome port and the extension you have 3 thumb screws. These thumb screws act as a retaining mechanism. They don't create the seal, nor do they improve it. They keep the parts from being pulled apart. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that the thumb screws are unthreaded so that they don't protrude onto the inside diameter of the part. In this particular case, I'm going to do that to both the extension and the dome port. Now that I have my thumb screws out of the way, I can take some of the included Ikelite lubricant, rip the cap off, set it aside, and simply put this between your finger and thumb, and it doesn't take a lot. What we want to do is we want to lubricate both the O-ring of the extension by simply running our fingers over it. Take the time to visually inspect your O-ring, but also feel. Some things that would be compromising a seal aren't necessarily something you can see, but you can feel them. And we're going to do the same thing to the O-ring on the port mount of the housing. It's the same O-ring with the same mechanism for sealing. And then I also like to take an opportunity to check the sealing surfaces of those corresponding O-rings. On the extension, for example, that is right here where the O-ring is going to make contact. So I can apply a little bit of additional lubricant and again feel for anything that's going to compromise this seal. I'll do the same thing on the 8-inch dome port. And we're good to go. Now, before we assemble this, I wanted to make a quick note. There are 3 thumb screws. Only one of these 3 thumb screws is going to correspond to one of the shades of the port itself. That shade is going to be the top or the noon position of our housing. So when we put everything together, we want that to be at the top. So take your dome port, set it down on its face like this. Take your extension. We're going to line up the thumb screws and simply press together. And in this case, we have to tighten the thumb screws of the dome port, and that will engage the extension. And just like that went together, this assembly will now go onto the housing. And because we've inspected and lubricated our O-ring, all we have to do is again make note of the thumb screw with the shade. That's going to be at the top. Press down till it's even all the way around, and then simply tighten the thumb screws. You shouldn't feel resistance in these thumb screws. Again, they go behind a ledge and they keep the parts from being pulled apart. The seal occurred when we assembled the 2 components together. And because we're in the future part here of this video, we're gonna put a vacuum on this system. All of these components are basically gonna be sucked together. So now you have as simple as that. You do have a little bit of adjustment room. I don't particularly like to over-rotate zoom or port extensions, but you can adjust it slightly before you put a vacuum on it. And that's as simple as that. Now we have a fully waterproof system with the 16 to 35 PZ. And all we have to do at this point is I'm gonna put a vacuum on the system, and we'll do a trim weight system on the bottom, and that's gonna help counterbalance some of the extra buoyancy of the large dome port, and they'll be ready to get in the water. Okay, so next step, we have to put a vacuum on the housing. Now what I recommend doing from personal experience is take an opportunity. I would take a few shots with the camera, make sure I didn't leave my lens cap on, make sure that I have a card in my camera, the kind of thing that will help improve my photography before I create a vacuum and have to go back and fix those things. I have already done that, but I do recommend you also do that. Now to create a vacuum in this system, all we do is basically push the button on the side of the valve, and it's gonna release the cap. The cap is tethered so that you can't set it aside and lose it. You do wanna make sure that this cap gets put back into the valve before you get in the water. That's very important. So keeping that in mind, let us hang to the side here. And we're going to take the barb of the pump, and that's gonna go where the cap came out of. And then you're simply just gonna pump the hand pump until you get to the desired level of vacuum. I usually recommend going to 10 or maybe 15, but the number that you choose isn't nearly as important as the fact that the vacuum isn't changing. The vacuum changing is going to indicate a leak, and of course that's gonna be a problem in the water. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pump this vacuum to 10. Now, I've pumped the vacuum to 10. Actually, I'm just one hair over 10, but that's okay. What I'm looking for initially after creating a vacuum is the needle. If the needle is steadily dropping at that point, I have a major problem that I need to address and discover and fix. In this particular scenario, that needle is staying right where we left it. What I could do is I could leave this set up like this and come back 10 or 15, 20 minutes later and see if it's changed. I don't particularly like doing that because if this pump, this hose or barb is compromised, that will give me a false reading that I have a compromised system. So what I do is I remove the barb from the valve by pushing the button, reinserting the plug, and letting this sit by itself. Now this is the system I'm going to be diving with. That's the system I want to test. Now I've taken this out of the equation. Ideally, I've done this the night before, and this is all ready to go and set up and right next to the door so I can grab it on the way out. I've got my camera's power settings so that they fall asleep. I never actually have to activate the on-off switch of the camera, so this would be ready to go. And then that's set like this all night long. Now the next day, I can come in, reinsert my valve or my pump, and check that I went right back to where I was, which was just a tick over 10, and I'm good to go. I know that this held vacuum for that long. If you don't have the luxury of doing it overnight, give yourself 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes that you can let this system set, and having set that it's held the vacuum for that amount of time. If it hasn't, or that number's changed, then you need to go in to investigate what happened. Maybe an O-ring or a hair crossed, something like that. But other than that, that's ready to go. In order to recheck it, let's pretend it's been the next day. I will take this, unplug it, put the barb back in, and immediately once that barb goes in, my needle jumps back to where it was, in this case, a hair over 10, and this is perfect. That means it held. Make sure you remove this and put this back in. For future reference, you will not be able to disassemble the system until you've released the vacuum on the system itself. To do so, you want to put your pump in. You'll notice there's a release button on the pump. There's one here on the bottom of this pump. If you have the older pump, it's a lever, and that will release the vacuum and let you disassemble the whole system. If you don't have access to this pump, you can push a pencil or a pen, something that's not sharp, down into the valve. That will release the button and therefore release the vacuum. Because I have this larger 8-inch dome port and I'm not going to be using strobes in today's scenario, I'm actually going to put the trim weight on the bottom, and that will help me perfectly trim out this dome port when I'm in the water, and a front to back and overall buoyancy. So I'll show you how to put that on real quick. Now, here's our trim weight system. This is going to stick out below the dome port. It gets overall attached to the bottom tray. Now, you'll notice there is an extension, and that's in order to take up the room from here to here so that it can shoot down and go directly below that. Today's demonstration, I have a particularly heavy weight, but that's the beauty of the system. This is weight that I do not have to travel with, nor will it take up room in my luggage, and dive weights are easy to come by in dive locations. So probably around a 2-pound weight or something in that range would be a good suit for this. But for the demonstration, let me just show you all we have to do. There'll be a link in the description below, so if you want to see how this all gets strapped to this plate here, you can take a look at that. But all we have to do is take our extension, and we're going to line it up. You'll notice that there are 1/4 holes on the bottom of this tray. What we're going to do is line it up with one of those. In this particular case, because that port is offset this direction, I'm going to choose this hole here, and then there's a slot here in this tray, and that corresponds to that. And then our threaded thumb screw is going to go in, and that's going to correspond to one of the holes in the bottom of the tray. And if you loosen that a little bit, you can actually jog this forward and backwards because it slides on that rail, and tighten it down at the desired location, and that will control the pitch of your system. The weight will control the overall buoyancy, but you can control how much it leans forward or backwards. Now, this is ready to get in the water, and we're all set. We have a vacuum, we have a trim weight system, and we're good to go. If you have any questions, please drop us a comment down below or shoot us an email to ikelite@ikelite.com.